Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Being Spiritual on Spiritual Psychic TV with me, your host, Ashley Robinson. Lovely to join you again, folks. We had an interim show last week where we discussed the paranormal, back to the usual program of Being Spiritual. And tonight I thought it'd be a good opportunity to have a proper old catch up with you and take on board some of the frequently asked questions and give you an opportunity to ask us anything. I take some influence this evening from White Eagle, one of my favourite spiritual guides, and also Silver Birch. So I've got a couple of bits and pieces that I've been reading from both Silver Birch and White Eagle, and some of their take, which has very much been part of my childhood and my foundation. If you are new to Spiritual Psychic TV, a special welcome to you. And if do let us know perhaps where you're watching the show from tonight. If you're on YouTube, make sure you've logged in and participate in the live chat. If you're on Facebook, make sure you're watching the main video feed from Spiritual Psychic TV and just write on the wall. And then Richard James, our producer, will be able to share your comments and questions with me. Yeah. The other thing we could do for us, folks, is help us continue to build this community. So think about sharing this stream either from YouTube or Facebook. Perhaps tag a friend, stick it out on WhatsApp, let a couple of people know what you're watching. And tonight is a spiritualist philosophy show. So it's all about spirituality, spiritualism, my spirituality in particular. Always keen to get your questions, and you can ask us anything to do with spiritualism and what has influenced me. I'm a South London based spiritualist medium, and we've been doing this show for about 12 months, and I think I've continued to learn every single time we've done this. I've learned from you, the viewers at home, and I've learned from my own guides. So this is a great platform for me to do this. And I'd now like to do a couple of hellos and welcomes to those of you that I know are joining the show. Okay, let's see who's here. So, Sharon Briggs Hennessy from Roehampton, London tonight. Hiya, Sharon. Josh Hughes, good evening. Richard said you've grown up quickly. You must know you. Oh, that's Bill's son. Wow, you definitely have grown up quickly. Yeah. Hi, Josh. Welcome. Claire says hello. Good evening, Claire Colbeck. Hiya. Alexandra Dunn, good evening. Alexandra, we're not doing spiritualist mediumship tonight. That'll be tomorrow night from 8 o'clock. Nikki says good evening to everyone. Hiya, Nikki. Millie B, hi, Ashley Richard, everyone else. Hiya, Millie. Christine Marius, good evening, Ash, Richard, everyone. Hiya, Christine. Julie Caswell, good evening, Julie. Mary Dixie, good evening to you. I've decided Mary and Christine Wood are my circle leaders that are still with us. We're going to get them on the show at some point over the next 12 months. Hiya, Deborah. And talk a little bit about spiritualist development. And I've said they can share any stories of me, of training me. LJ Blue Eyes, that's a pretty cool handle. Good evening, everyone on the chat and SPTV team. Livy, good evening. How's it all going? Lovely Terry Wall. Hiya, Terry. Natasha Hanbury from South Wales. Hiya, Natasha. And Suzanne Riches. Good evening to you. Charlotte. Good evening, Charlotte. Charlotte Goodburn. Hiya. Jules Harding. Hiya. And Rosie Anderson, the Queen of the Cards. Hiya, Rosie. And Sammy Haley. You're new here, and oh, I'm new. Can I hear from you, please? Hiya, Sammy. I say tonight's a spiritualist philosophy show, so we're talking about being spiritual. And if you're looking for mediumship, in particular in free readings, that'll be Saturday nights from 8 p.m. on this channel, and Sunday mornings, as well as a few of the other regular shows. And we got a hello from Dundee from Sharon. Caroline Jones, good evening to you on Facebook. Hiya. Lovely Holly Johnston. Thank you for liking and sharing. And for those that are regular viewers, you know that we've got a new show with Holly. Do check that out. Jeanette Fleming, hi, good evening to you too. Yeah, mum and dad are well, and yeah, my mum hasn't been feeling very well at all the last week, but she's doing better. Thank you, Jeanette. Georgia Chelsea Matthew, good evening. Hiya. Murray Harris, hello from Texas. Hiya, Murray. I do have a soft spot for Texas. My favourite Stetson in Texas. Hiya, Linda Williams. Linda Wilson, sorry. Hiya, Linda. Jasmine Brown, hello to you too. Sally Worker, hiya, Sally. Thanks for liking and sharing. That's appreciated. Joanne Lewis. Hi, Mary Sarah. Great. And folks, we've got a lovely community. Raven Mystique Eddie. Hello, hello. I keep on unplugging things and breaking the interwebs. Well, hi there, Raven. Um, if you are on Facebook, folks, do make sure after the show you head over to the SPTV fan page, Pamela Roger or ITTU too. And for all of you, all of your socials, you'll find us across everything now. Hey there, Sarah. TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, Facebook. My own Facebook page is at Ash Robinson Medium. But there's also a wonderful website, folks. Mary Murray, first time. Good evening to you, Mary. We're chatting spiritualist philosophy today. So check out the spiritualpsychictv.online website. It's a fantastic cave of information, Aladdin's cave of information. Alison Lett, you're new and you're looking forward to this. Hi, Alison. So we're having a chat tonight, so get your questions ready. But yeah, spiritualpsychictv.online, fantastic website. We've got a directory now. You can whack in your postcode. You can find your local mediums, your local churches, your local centres. There's opportunities to sort of buy and sell things amongst the spiritualist community. Are you there, Wendy, Lindsay? Opportunity to look at events, both online events and face-to-face events, and a number of other amazing things, folks. So do make sure after the show you head over to the website. Thanks to all of you that have subscribed. And Alison is from Canada. Is it Ontario? Lovely. Hiya, Alison. So I said I'm going to take a little bit of influence from White Eagle and Silver Birch this evening. Raven wants to see Ashley do some of the TikTok dances. I'll be the equivalent of a spiritual levitating bag of spanners, I think, Raven, on TikTok. But I've actually got a TikTok account now. I've got some resident friends, much younger than me that can take me through the ropes. I remember when I was the family teenager that used to tell everyone about technology. Now I'm having to learn about the right hashtags and the right social media impact. So anyone that's got some good tips, can sum in. But for me, the mission is simple. It's share my knowledge of life after life, share my knowledge of life after death, share the truths of spiritualism. And the bigger platform we can do that across Spiritual Psychic TV, the better. Hi there, Caroline from Essex. So I'm going to start just by reading a little bit from White Eagles, just a couple of paragraphs, just to get us in the mood. And then I'm going to talk a little bit inspired by my team, my executive committee of guides. And for those of you that are very new to this, when we talk about guides, what we're talking about, in my opinion, is we're talking about someone who resides in that place I call heaven, in the spirit world, place of pure thought, of pure energy. Often the word guide refers to someone we think of and as an evolved soul, someone that would have incarnated on earth perhaps numerous times and then dedicate their life from the spirit world to that of serving us in our human incarnation as we go through that 3D experience. And White Eagle and Silver Birch are two people who have influenced me in my spiritualism. They're part of my foundation. And I'm going to share a couple of bits and pieces from them today, and then talk a little bit about how it's done me. So Charlotte says, have you created TikTok? And what is your handle? So the Spiritual Psychic TV one, Richard, you have the wrong. I think it is Spiritual Psychic TV online, isn't it? On TikTok, yeah. So check us out, Charlotte. And then me, Ash Robinson Medium. I can't remember all the different handles. So at Ash Robinson Medium is me on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and anything else. And I think Spiritual Psychic TV, you very much see that brand across all the social media handles as well. And I'm learning, Richard, we can go live on TikTok as well once we build up our audience and community there. So other good opportunities for the channel. Right. So the book I'm going to share with you, it's a White Eagle book of meditation. Make sure that's Is that a bit blurry? And there's this bit I feel inspired to share with you. So bear with me for a couple of minutes, folks. Look up into the sun. Take little notice of passing difficulties and obstacles. Keep on keeping on steadily. There are forces which would buffet and confuse you, but you will overcome those forces by steady looking up towards the Christ. Look up into the sun, to the point of light in the heart of the sun. Surrender to the divine wisdom, knowing that what is happening to you is an opportunity for you to grow in love, to draw closer to divine love. Do not think of life in the physical body as being the only life. Think of life as being eternal, and of yourself as a tiny spark of that divine life. One day to return to the heart of the sun. You are the child of God and learning to walk a path which is leading you back to your heavenly parents. This is the goal of your life. Conscious union with God, divine love and wisdom and peace and joy. The secret when you are feeling hurt and disappointed with yourself, or with the circumstances, or with your brother or sister, man and woman, is to learn to rise in thought to God. Thou knowest my soul's need. I resign my life to thee. Now, we would draw you into the great heart. You are the children of God, and all good flows from God. For one quiet moment, try to use the power of thought and imagination to visualize the form of Christ, the Son, the golden one, all love. See him robed in the light of the sun, radiating love from mankind. Be still. You are in him. He is in you. You are nothing, yet everything. Peace be with you. All is well when you dwell at peace within God's heart and feel God within your own heart as a quickening presence, as a living warmth and comfort. So that's from White Eagle, and I love that. But for me, I want to break it down a little, because if we take you back to the very first show just after 12 months ago, we spent about 45 minutes talking about who and what is God. And a couple of times when we spoke about spiritualism and the Bible, we've spoke about bits of the Bible, missing words in the Bible, only printed as the word. We ran an experiment, didn't we, folks? We said, what if that word was energy? So in the beginning was God, and God was energy. That, for me, paints a very different picture of Christianity and spiritualism. We ran a show which you can find on playback. Was Jesus a medium? Well, he absolutely was. He was a fantastic healer and medium, and a great ambassador for spirituality, a great teacher. Although I don't refer to myself these days as a Christian spiritualist, it's a label I felt very comfortable and proud of doing. As a spiritualist, I do accept the leadership of Jesus, the teacher, the leader, Jesus the Nazareth. We think about books like White Eagle of Meditation. We think about the times that these were printed. And this is one of my dad's ones. I think this book was printed in the 1970s. Looking at the pricing, it feels about right. And you think about gender. You think about God perhaps as a supreme being, as a person, perhaps a male energy. And we talk about God in spiritualism now as Mother, Father God. Even the language, that the way the guide was interpreted in what was a physical trance state, was still being influenced by the incarnation of the medium and the palate and their knowledge and understanding, even in a trance state. Because we think about the way the book was written and the way that other books were written around this time. In common was masculinity and male gender. He, him. Most of our laws rules written about that, and generally meant to mean he, she, they. We think about the language that we would use now, people that would describe themselves as gender neutral, or sort of fluid, and make sure I get all the terms right. Non-binary. There's lots of things to describe you, and ultimately it's down to you, isn't it? It's private. So Pamela, good question. I will come back to that. And team have in plan tonight. They have me going through some of my foundations and picking it apart. But I still love this, and I love the way it's written, and it's written in the way lots of books were written. But as we look at some of those words, we talk about the word Christ. Christ is a very Christian word to a certain extent. Jesus Christ, in particular. We talk about here God as a masculine energy. We also talk about him, and we talk about the children of God. Us being all the products of that. And as I say, for me, as we talk now and as we understand things, it still transfers. And I love that idea of looking up to the sun. You'll often see sunflowers in and around spiritualism. Certainly at Wimbledon Spiritualist Church, we talk about turning to face the sun. The bit I read from White Eagle was teachings that White Eagle had given us around meditation. And it was largely contained in Grace Cook's Meditation and the Jewel in Lotus. However, it has long been felt that a further book was required, and this little book here was almost like an off-thought after that. And this was to assist and lead with individual prayers, meditations, developing a daily or weekly program of meditation. The still voice fills this need. And I love the fact that this little book is those little book of snippets. The book says all who are attracted by the quiet words of White Eagle will love this book, whether or not they meditate regularly, for it is the perfect companion whenever peace of mind is sought, or an enduring answer to human problems. So I do love that little book, The Still Voice. Now going back to Pamela's question, my question, Ash, what plans do your team have for you? So tonight is very much about unpicking and picking at some of the status quo and challenge the status quo. There was also this opportunity, I think, if I take the question a little bit further, about plans for me. And they constantly change. For spirit are incredibly patient. And throughout my life in different stages, I've got to different points. I remember saying to my mum and dad, I hope you don't be offended, but I don't follow in your footsteps and go into, ministerial work. And yet about 2 years ago, it's exactly what I said. Sign me up. I want to be a minister for spiritualism. I want to continue my work in that direction. I remember being fascinated by the concept of someone's life after their life in incarnation. And although I felt spirit around me, felt content with that. And I remember saying as a youngster, I hope you don't mind if I don't ever do the mediumship. And then when I started delivering mediumship in private circle, I said to my parents, I hope you don't mind if I don't work at your churches, because I don't feel I'll ever work on platform. And then when I was working at Hatbridge and Wimbledon Spiritualist Church, and then being invited out to others. See, spirits always understand a plan for us. They're always aware of a destiny, and our guides to a certain extent do. But we are born with that free will. It is our choice, our decision. And everything else in our physical lives that influences that, affects that free will, spirit are patient. And ultimately they're there. My principal guide had already dedicated my entire earthly life that was going to be about them supporting me, showing service to me. My mediumship guides were patient. They knew the time would come when they would be used more. So onwards, upwards and forwards, Pamela, I think is the general trajectory. I've loved this opportunity of working more closely with Richard James over the last year. He produces, I think you'll agree, such a fantastic variety of content for us all. Very proud to see our divine service being broadcast across the channels. And I think this goes back to that 1982 mission of my grandfather, Derek Robinson, and his friends Gordon Higginson, Jesse Nason, and Doris Stokes, to promote the concept of life after death, to share our knowledge and the truths of spiritualism. That's what the plan for my team is they'll continue to give me the truths and evidence them and show me a proven portfolio of that evidence so I can tell other people about my truths so that some of that may become truths for them too. And what's really interesting for me, based on my understanding of the afterlife, is there is only one afterlife. There is only one spirit world, but there is an infinite number of dimensions and possibilities within that afterlife. And as the guides all come to work for me, work with me, show that service to spiritualism by working through me, and I surrender myself to their will, I find it funny that they don't all agree with each other. I do believe that my old friend Ralph Steadman acts as some sort of chairman for all of them, where he, being one of the latest and greatest teachers to me with my own spirituality, my own spiritual philosophy, he gets them all together and says, well, we need something common here. We need this opportunity. We can't all have different opinions on this. We need to give this boy some truths. So let's give him more of the jigsaw, more of the puzzle, so that he may take a step back and see the bigger picture emerging for him. So I want to do everything I can to promote spiritualism and to share knowledge of life after death, focusing on that life after life. Death is but a change, the change we call death. How we live this life, which we only get to live once in this body, is really important. Being authentic, being our best, all of the time, as much as the time we can, all of that is enormously important. So for me, it's about breaking from the shackles of my 3D incarnation and having that opportunity. So thanks for that question, Pamela. It's really good. And folks, really keen to get your thoughts today. I don't know if anything I've said with the reading was of interest to you. But anything on offer tonight. So Jackie Baker says, how do spirits of babies communicate? Well, that's a lovely question, Jackie. They communicate in the same way as my other communicators. Now, for want of using a sort of modern word, you could say that it's almost a type of telepathic communication. So as a medium, you'll often hear people talk about clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, clair being the French word, I think, for seeing. And it's whether or not you're seeing physically, you're seeing with your eyes, spirit, hearing physically with your ears, smelling perhaps spirit, feeling spirit. Most of my mediumship, I would say probably 90% of my mediumship evidence actually comes in more of a telepathic form. We did a show where we dedicated to the sort of the learning steps, and within my mind's eye, I see a mirror or a blank canvas, and I surrender myself. I clear that part of the brain. I store the shopping list and all the other jobs I've still got to do, cut the grass and that sort of stuff. And once it's totally clear, I invite spirit and my guides to come through. And developing a form of attunement, like tuning knobs on a radio over a period of time. And for me, I've been formally developing for the last 20 years and still learning every single day. But getting that attunement just right with my guides. And I always imagine this little waiting room in heaven where the personality, the consciousness, the soul of the person that incarnated, however briefly, on earth, even if it was only at the point of conception inside the womb, that the energy of that personality is what's communicating with me, sometimes directly and sometimes via my guides. Now, although there is no physical need for a body in the spirit world, most of the evidence I've had from that place is people do recreate a spiritual body. It's like an interface for them. They had one for such a long time in their previous incarnation, but they can replicate it without any of the imperfections. And time not being as relevant to them where they are, they can replicate that body to any time, past, present, or future. So sometimes when babies communicate, they are communicating based on a very limited experience of an incarnation on Earth. Sometimes that is only during conception, 3-6 months perhaps of being with mother in her womb. But sometimes they grow up. Sometimes they grow up And the evidence of the personality is to show them growing up as they have made a decision in the spirit world to educate that personality, to continue to invest in that personality. So, for example, if I take at least 2 or 3 occasions, my wife and I had what was called failed pregnancies or miscarriages. I know that at the point of conception starts the birth of that incarnation, that the energy of the personality is ready and waiting for that incarnation. Now, of course, at the very start of conception, it's the size of a baked bean and all of the things haven't developed. So it's not like a full personality being downloaded into what I was very affectionately our baked bean baby. But it's the start of that. And it's the start of that relationship with the mother and the father and feeling of love around. And my eldest son is now 6. So I'd have to probably go back 7 to 10 years over the missed pregnancies. And the evidence I've had from the spirit world of my own children who never got to walk on this planet, on Earth, is that they've grown up at the same sort of rate of time. So we lost, we believe, a boy who would have been a boy approximately 10 years ago, and they are now approximately the age of 10. And when they communicate with me, often with assistance, it's been at a relevant age to what they would have been. But the personality, of course, the baby that's still developing with a physical communication, the ability to talk and communicate, that isn't obstructed in the same way it would be on Earth. You have to scream to let mum and dad know you're hungry or thirsty, you need a nappy change, or you're too hot or too cold. And you can feel the intention behind. The other interesting thing with babies and children is that for me as a medium, they're almost always accompanied by other members of the family. And in the same way that I'm picking up telepathically from that communicator, they're almost helping them to communicate. Of course, you'd have to go back and watch a couple of other shows about the concept of reincarnation. But the incarnation of the baby or the child that could have been may well have incarnated in previous lives. And that combined energy that now makes up the soul of that person in the spirit world, they may be able to lean on that previous experience as part of that development of communication. So, Jackie, I hope that answers your question. As a sidetrack, it's the same way for me from the animal kingdom. I'm no Dr. Doolittle, but when, let's take Brandy Dog, my Nanny Hazel and Grandad Dell's little Yorkshire Terrier. While he was alive, he was my best mate. And we used to imagine Brandy Dog on little adventures, flying planes and driving cars, because you start to see the personality within your animals. And when Brandy's passed on, often I just get that feeling of him being around, sometimes hearing the little tin-tin of his collar. But actually, when my nan and granddad have communicated with me, they just say, Brandy's here, he's all right, he's doing well up here. I've given evidence from people's dogs to them. Thanks for my fish and chips dinner or whatever it is you let me, eat. And of course, it's not the dog talking to me in the same way I'm using English as a language now. There are no barriers. So Jackie says that makes so much sense. And thank you, Jackie, for that feedback. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I know that other mediums will have slightly different opinions of it. My good friend Ralph is reminding me now, as the chair of my executive committee, that he always believed that the personality didn't actually sort of join the baby as an incarnation until about 6 months in, because it required the physical interfaces of the body and other bits and pieces. But he also tells me he continues to take a spiritual step every day up there. Thank you, Ralph. Raven says, do we really need tables to denote working for with spirits? What do you mean, Raven, by tables? I don't know if or maybe labels. Maybe it's labels. Do we really need labels? Probably labels. Raven, do correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been a more deeper meaning to tables. Yeah, probably labels. When I read it out aloud, my dyslexia autocorrects, so I'm going to say it was labels. And I think you're absolutely right, Raven. We don't need labels. Labels, I think, though, are important to some people. But again, in the same way that labels may or may not be important to some people, the actual label is private and personal. Whatever you call yourself, whatever you don't call yourself, it's important, of course, that you don't label others. if you're going to label anything, allow people to say how they want to be labeled or described or considered. But actually, what a wonderful world we'd live in if everyone had that mutual respect of each other, regardless of labels. And for me, it's a fascinating thing within spiritualism. I live with my wife, Claire. We've been together 21 years now. And when I met Claire, we were just youngsters. She was 16, I was 17, and she's half Irish and she's Catholic, and she would still call herself Catholic now. She's been married to a spiritualist for 16 years. She is a qualified spiritual healer with United Spiritualists, but she would still refer to herself as Catholic because that's the label that she is happy with. Our children who have been baptized spiritualist and named Catholics and spiritualists, on the census we put one down as a Catholic spiritualist and the other one down as a spiritualist Catholic, because we thought it was important until they're old enough to decide how they want to identify, that we showed that we were going to bring them up with the education and the benefits of both. So yeah, good question, Raven. I hope I've interpreted it correctly. It was about labels, and we don't. Spirit aren't fussed. We can call ourselves whatever we want as long as we're working in the light, and we stand for love, and we stand for light, and we stand for truth. They're not fussy. They work with absolutely every one of us. And it's all about that mutual respect for each other. So yeah, lovely, Raven. Mystique. I like that. Love that. Mystique Eddie. Thank you. And if we've got another question, I'll tell that. Okay, Siobhan Rook, is there any risk of inviting the wrong spirit when trying to develop your spiritual development when meditating and opening your chakras? Yes and no. So depending on your interpretation of risk. So first thing is that, as a caveat, I do not believe there is anything in the spirit realms which can harm you or do anything to you without your implied consent. I'd like to call it informed consent because you would invite it. Of course, without proper dedication to working in the light, let's say if you throw in the balance of mixing your spiritual development with alcohol or drugs or lack of sleep or lack of food or whatever else may affect your own sort of conscious judgment, it may mean that that affects the way that you engage with people in the spirit world. Because put yourself in a crowded high street in the middle of the day with your wits and your guards about you. In general terms, you're going to trust your instinct and your guide. You're going to use all of your senses to judge who it is you're talking to. And when you're at home, even if you lived off the high street, you're going to lock your front door and you're only going to open it to people who you know and you want in your home. And working with spirit for me is very much like that. If you leave your front door open at home and absolutely anyone's welcome to walk in, then you're a very trust-giving person. And perhaps you increase the likelihood, and if we talk about risk, increasing that likelihood that someone might come into your home that you didn't invite. So there's an element in the spirit world of working out where that door is. Some people even call it their doorkeeper or their door guard, their bouncer, their spiritual, and understanding who and when you will open that door and let people into your life, and who you've got on your door, checking identification and credentials and all those types of things. That makes a big, big difference. So yes, there is risk if you leave the door open. And part of any spiritual development, I'd always say there is an awful lot you can do by reading books and watching things on YouTube. But ideally, you want someone that's a little bit further on the journey than you to give you a helping hand. And ideally, this person would be your circle leader. You'll find good circle at your local spiritualist church or centre. Indeed, there's some great educational snippets from within the Spiritual Psychic TV Academy and online. So ideally, find yourself a good circle leader. But yes, there's risk involved in anything, but it's all about controlled risk. I hope I've answered that. Billy Collins says, "Lol, my son was at a Catholic school and was trying a simple Ouija board with his friends. They brought the priest to speak to him. He quite bluntly told the priest, 'Well, you have the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Why can't I talk to mine?'" Thanks for sharing that, Billy. And we've often had conversations about the Ouija board. And again, for me, the Ouija board is a wonderful tool, but you need to use it in the right circumstances. It's like that front door again. So thanks for sharing. Willow Pierce says, "I'm blessed. I see my mother in dream time twice a week. I've actually spoke to her in the dream and held her and said, 'Mother, I'm on earth and you're in spirit,' and we are chatting." Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Willow, for sharing that. And for me, the dream state is a wonderful opportunity to communicate with people in the spirit world to learn from them. I think that when we start to give up, on the physical body because it needs a bit of rest, we're able as a consciousness to be much closer to heaven. Terry Wall says, I met my doorkeeper, gatekeeper, bouncer on a Sunday in our VIP development group. Lovely, Terry. We actually did a show, didn't we? On one of my Being Spiritual shows where we did a little doorkeeper meditation. So again, folks, I think it was the show entitled Meet Your Doorkeeper, Meet Your Guides. You could always watch that on playback and do a nice little controlled meditation. Millie B says, and how do you know where to start on your spiritual journey? Such as becoming a healer, medium, psychic, etc., is just what you feel drawn to for you. Absolutely, Millie. And it might start by asking the question, how do you know when to start on your spiritual journey? We're all on a journey and we're all going ultimately in the direction we're meant to be. Whether or not we've got an idea of what the finish line looks like, be it the land of milk and honey or paradise or utopia, very much living our life for the now, doing things that make us happy with people that make us happy is part of that journey. It's part of that experience. But ultimately, it's about going where you feel drawn. Now, to a certain extent, sitting in circle, starting to meet your guide, meet your guides, meet your team, working with other people, you may start to get an influence. When I've read for clients as a spiritualist medium, sometimes you get people from spirit wanting to influence and start to tell you. And sometimes because of the energy transfer between a medium and a client, or the same with a healer and a client, you pick up on that little energy exchange and you get those little cues perhaps from the spirit world, which is, look, psst, she's a really good healer. We're still waiting for her to get ready for this. Plant a seed, tell her she's got the gift. And you have to think about your own professional discipline as a medium, about what's appropriate to share or what's okay to share as a healer. And there's lots of different sort of doctrines and schools of thought with this, but ultimately it's your decision. And as a gift, I think that we all have the potential, right? We all have the power to be mediums, to be healers. Psychic for me is quite a physical thing. It's a physical sort of energy. It's reading people with energy, but everyone has the ability to do that. Okay, Millie. If I asked everyone now to get a pencil and a piece of paper, everyone would probably be able to find that with either immediately or quite quickly. Everyone would have a slightly different pencil and have a slightly different piece of paper. So we're all kind of starting that journey in the same way. But ultimately, if I said, right, everyone, I want you to draw a house. This house is going to have a roof. It's going to have a chimney. It's going to have 3 windows and a door. We'd all start drawing that down. And the instructions would be simple enough for most people to draw that. But when we show everyone our drawings, there will be this huge range of ability. There would also be this huge range of interpretation. What was Ash talking about when he said house? Didn't say that, didn't tell me exactly where to put the windows, so I put them all on the ground floor. Or it didn't tell me it was a bungalow or a 3-story, 4-story, 5-story. So interpretation is a big part of understanding the instruction. And then, of course, there's ability. Some of you might say, pencil. I'm going to work on my canvas with my oils and my brushes. And there'll be brilliant, talented artists. I remember being very jealous at primary school and then again at high school of mates of mine that were so brilliantly talented when it comes to drawing. I've always wanted to be able to draw, particularly like cartoon style characters. And I've got it in my mind and I just cannot get it down to paper. Other people were just more naturally talented. But do you know what? If I practiced every single day drawing, my drawing would get better. And that's a bit like spiritual development. Keep practicing. Your drawing will get better. Now, I definitely won't ever get as good as some of my mates that, 20 years ago were better drawers than me, but I will definitely improve. And I think that all of us, therefore, find our own medium. It's all about that discipline of continuing to practice. But, I suppose it's not really a dream, but I kind of gave up on that thought of I'm going to be this brilliant, talented artist. I just wasn't going to be. But by the time I was about 10 or 11, I was way in front of most of my mates when it comes to computing and technology. And I could strip a desktop computer down and rebuild it and upgrade memory and other bits and pieces. Struggled with my reading and my writing and a few other bits and pieces at school. So we all excel in different things. And we all get different aspects of fun in what we do, and having fun and enjoying what we do and feeling like we're adding value is really important. So the fact you're asking the question, Millie, that sounds like you're certainly on your journey. Just go with the flow, explore and experiment, find people that can help you perhaps experience different things, see what feels right, see where you feel you can add some value, and go in that direction. Lovely question, Millie. Thank you very much. Take some water. Is there a certain time you have to pass before loved ones start to communicate for them to settle in, if that makes sense? Lovely question, Amy. So, folks, Amy's saying, is there a certain time that you have to pass before loved ones start to communicate for them to settle in? So, yes and no, right? And I think if any medium ever says to you that, you know, Fred blogs can't communicate right now because they haven't been in heaven long enough, I think that is potentially wrong, because I do know for a fact, because I've had the evidence, that people within seconds of leaving this physical world to being in heaven are able to give evidence of that continuation of life after life, and they can do it. Whether or not they want to is up to them, and it all depends about the circumstances of their death, because sometimes there are things that compartmentalize your own opinions and beliefs so much that it would restrict your ability. So if you live 80 years of your life in the firm belief that after your physical life there is zilch, there is nothing, and you've never seen any other reason to believe otherwise, when you finish in this life and you have a life after life, it's going to take a certain amount of time for you to understand that there is a life after life. And then it's going to take a little bit of time for you to understand that you can communicate. And you'll probably have friends and family coming to meet you and say, you weren't quite wrong about, you weren't quite right either. You weren't quite wrong about some of that. So perhaps it's a personal thing. There are others, and I have this beautiful lady in my life that was always felt like a grandmother figure to me, a lady called Fernie. And she used to say to us at the church, and she was at church 3 or 4 times a week. She said, when I go, you'll never hear from me again. I'll be off there doing so many wonderful things. I'll be too busy. And although I know she's up there, we have never had that evidence from her. So I think a lot of it is down to their personal sort of preference. One of the things I also know for certain is that sometimes there is so much psychological wear and tear or impact on your physical life that when you get to heaven, you need a bit of rest and relaxation. And it's the equivalent of being sent off to a spa for a bit of time where you start to get to grips with it. I've had this perhaps from victims of crime, victims, perhaps someone that's been murdered, very angry about what's happened to them, and they don't necessarily feel ready to communicate, even though they're making that impact. Sometimes there's this element of unfinished business. People talk about a limbo or a transition where people aren't quite ready to go towards the light and be in heaven. So there's lots of different things that can affect it. But in theory, there is no amount of time that has to pass before loved ones start to communicate. And I think that it's often, in my opinion, unfair when mediums say that it's not possible, you must wait, 6 months, 9 months, etc. I don't think that's the case. One of the difficulties I have as a medium in my own personal limitations is I'm not a DJ and I can't take requests. Amy, you can't come to me and say, I want to speak to my second cousin twice removed. I want to speak to Auntie Flo. And it annoys me as a human being that I can't just go, boom, I'm attuned. I've got my spirit guides. Go and find Amy's Auntie Flo. And it's really frustrating for me because it just doesn't work like that. And therefore, some of the conversations I've had with Catholic members of my in-laws is you can't disturb the dead because there is no death. There is a life after life, and you can't disturb them because I can't summon them. I can't bring them. And I've been at experimental seances and all sorts of things. Anyone in the spirit world, it's up to them whether or not they want to communicate. We can't disturb them. We can't rush them. It is entirely up to them. But when they want to and when they can, they will find opportunities to come back and communicate. And to a certain extent, it's about whether or not we're ready to listen. One of the shows we did about reincarnation, we spoke about the concept of the walkie-talkie in your bag that you're carrying right now with a direct line to your guides and your loved ones in heaven. But it might take your entire lifetime to even realize you have this walkie-talkie on you. And then, of course, when you find it, you have to work out how to use it, and you have to charge it up, and you have to practice. Well, in heaven, they have to believe there is a walkie-talkie back. There is this opportunity to communicate back down and with others. And then they need to find it, and they need to use it, and they need to attune. So, yes, there is this sort of spectrum of, for some people, bing, absolutely immediate. and for others it just takes a bit more time. And perhaps that's because they're getting over some psychological stuff, perhaps they're just not ready to, or they don't want to. So Amy Andrews, I do hope that answers your question. Tim, the lovely Tim, I saw you with your picture and your diploma in Spirituals National Union. Congratulations to you, Tim. Lovely photo. And again, goes back to what we were just saying, doesn't it, about dedication and always taking a spiritual advancement. Tim says, I think the person who communicates is the person you need to, not necessarily the person you want to. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And that's my frustration as the DJ, is I can't summon that person, but often, very often, all of my clients are happy with the evidence they do get. Amy says, a lot of people do say to me that I'm not ready to hear, and I never understand why they say it. Yeah, so hopefully that does add a little bit of context, Amy. And, I agree with what Tim just said there. We get the message we need, not necessarily the message we want. Sometimes spirit communicators, because it's their personality, they can be cheeky. You might have someone that you really didn't like, and they come through and they want to try and apologise because they die regretted. They didn't have that opportunity. And, of course, in this life, as much as in the other life, you can tell them where to go, be that to come closer or to continue to evolve. Willow Piers says, can we be actually having many lives at once? And I'm going to see you in another reality. Thanks. Willow, I think it's absolutely possible. I'm really still learning more about metaphysics. But the more I understand about energy and atoms and particles of energy, is that there is this sort of, the universe is constantly expanding and exploring itself, and we're constantly evolving. So yes, I think that we already know that particles of atoms can be in many places at different times and still be in constant communication with each other. I think that it is possible to have many lives at once, and going to see them in other lives. Based on my GCSE grade C in science from 20 years ago, and a very limited knowledge of metaphysics, I tend to see most things quite lateral. And this idea of living in life as Ashley Robinson, as an incarnation of Ashley Robinson, as the human being. And at the end of the life of Ashley Robinson, the body is finished, that becomes a corpse. The personality of Ashley Robinson, that goes to this beautiful place called heaven. And the energy behind that personality of Ashley Robinson would communicate with its loved ones still on earth, and it would have lots of fun with other people in heaven. And that, for me, is a nice sort of simple understanding of it. But I'm also a great believer in reincarnation. So when the incarnation of Ashley Robinson just becomes the soul in the spirit world, does that incarnation of Ashley Robinson just become the next page of the scrapbook, and all my other previous lives are part of this other scrapbook, and that is actually part of the soul? Or is the soul in itself part of something even bigger? I've still got lots of questions about that, but I think it's all absolutely possible. And actually, we talk about universes. We talk about, multiple universes, parallel universes, every decision, every cause and effect, perhaps creating different opportunities. And of course, if God is energy, and God and energy is everything, and the universe is just trying to experience as many things as it can, it would continue to expand. So that was a very fast answer for a very sort of complex question that involves metaphysics. But in answer to, can we be actually having many lives at once? I believe it's possible. And am I going to see her in another reality? Thanks. Quite possible. For me, as I say, there's quite a lateral element to how I am able to understand and comprehend things in this physical body. Sally Worker says, I've heard of people coming in a coma coming through mediums. And, I'm not a medical expert, Sally, but depending on the state that you're in as a coma, there's this element perhaps that all of the various interfaces of the human body, the physical body, the spiritual body, the soul, all of that being in such a state of physical trauma that the interfaces are coming loose. And the personality, the aura, the soul, consciousness, the personality of that person that's in physical trauma is so far detached from those interfaces that are actually finding themselves much closer to the spirit world and where they come from, and then perhaps where they are now. So yeah, I've heard that too, and I've heard people that have said they've had that evidence. I've never had someone who has claimed to be the personality of someone who's still legally classified as alive. But what I have had is communicators who have explained how their last chapter of their life perhaps was on a life support machine, and how that physical body kept them like an umbilical cord tied to this incarnation in this 3D experience. But it was almost like they had one foot in and one foot out of the body towards the spirit world. And I've had that many, many times from spirit communicators that talk about that talk about being in the room as a spiritual being, hearing conversations, being aware of the love and the light being sent towards them, even though their physical body was unable, because it was unconscious, to understand that. So yeah, lovely question there, Sally Worker. Thank you very much. Millie B says, Ashley, why do some spirits say they're confused and don't know what happened when they get to spirit world? Is it a case we go to sleep in our human form and wake up in a spirit realm? I think it all depends on the circumstances of the physical end of your life, Millie. So, let's take my two granddads as examples. So my granddad Rick, my mum's dad, spent most of his life in a working class family in South London. He was a docker at Waterloo and a dustman in Sutton, and was baptised at Church of England, even sang in the Church of England sort of high choir. He had a very limited but simple understanding of a place called heaven that he would go to if he had done more positive than negative in his life. And then when his 16-year-old daughter, my mum, got engaged to my dad, and he was kind of into the spiritualist sort of side of the world, he slowly adapted sort of some of his thoughts, and his mind started to change when my nan had entered the spirit world before him. Now, for him, when he actually died, he'd gone into hospital because he'd had a slip, trip and fall outside his house with a urine infection, got over that with some antibiotics, then picked up some sort of mystery virus around the start of the COVID pandemic, which had a pneumonia type effect on him, and boom, he went to sleep and he didn't wake up. He probably woke up in the spirit world. So for him, there would have been an element of confusion. I don't understand. I went in here because I slipped outside the flat. Why am I now suddenly here? Or where is here? What does this mean? My other grandfather had started off, similar realms of my granddad Rick, my granddad Dell, but spiritualism very much changed, and I would say probably saved his life as a younger man. And actually, when he died, he spoke about the fact that before he died, he would go on poltergeist courses. He knew about the power of spirit, he knew about all the opportunities, and his knowledge of spiritualism was far greater than that of my granddad Rick's. However, he got sepsis in hospital. So he fell out of a hospital bed and done his hip, had an operation for that, was sat up on a Saturday night eating cockles and having a great old chat, went to sleep, boom, suddenly woke up in the spirit world because sepsis sort of got hold of him. So even with that type of knowledge, the confusion of the physical death could make a big difference. And I'm sharing personal stories to hopefully have the context, but my great nanny Maggie, so my granddad Rick's mother, when she died, she got to a very old age in her 80s, and she was in hospital, and she'd actually asked for my dad to come. And in her belief, in her culture, she wanted the equivalent of what most people refer to as sort of last rites. And my dad spoke about being with her in the hospital, where she sort of said, has everyone left? Have all the family gone apart from you, Ray? And actually, once everyone had left that hospital room and she felt she was able to, it was almost as if the spiritual self within her personality knew that it was time to transition, and she effectively closed her eyes and went to heaven. And it's a beautiful story as a young boy, my dad telling me about it, because he could see physical things and changes around that transition of her life after the physical life that she had had. And there was a lot less confusion for there. She was already aware of her mum and dad that were in that hospital room saying, it's time, it's okay to cross over. And it was an incredible story that had a massive impact on me. So if you think about all the sad and tragic ways that people can die, I've had a mate of mine that was murdered, 2 punches, boom, in the spirit world. He didn't even have the time for emergency workers to try and bring him back to life. he would have been really confused. He was a young bloke. He was 18 years old. He had his entire life ahead of him, so there would have been that confusion. Victims of accidents, people that hit on motorbikes in cars, victims of murder, those types of people. There's all this sort of confusion. They don't quite get it. There may be people that might have seen themselves in an accident or be injured, and they could see being worked on, or perhaps they've seen themselves in the hospital and they don't really understand, or they didn't have that knowledge that this was sort of end of life on life. So I think all of it's absolutely possible. Hopefully, Millie, I've given you a bit of understanding of the way that I understand it. And actually, there's this opportunity for them to go towards that light, or the love and feeling of that light, with friends and family that are going to help contextualize that for them. But one time we might do a show entirely dedicated to the concept of spirit rescue work, or rescue circles. And every now and then, particularly around sort of the element of things I would refer to like seances, you come across spirit communicators who actually don't know anyone in the group, in the seance. They don't have someone they can claim to be in relation to the physical life they led. And some people might describe these people as trapped or in limbo, but definitely confused souls that are ultimately looking to go in the right direction. And they're not quite ready to leave that life, even if that's been many earth years along. So thank you for that. Sarah Mills says, my dad, whilst he was dying, described a journey he was going on, almost like going on holiday. He was waiting for a car to take him to the airport. He described it in great detail. Is this him describing his journey towards heaven, or would this be all in his imagination? It was like he was waiting for the Roman to pass. Sarah, beautiful story, and thank you so much for sharing that. I like to believe that that was his understanding of that next step of his life after life. And I like to believe, without knowing all of the facts, that they were little seeds of things being planted for him. And as I say, that my simple human brain, the way that it understands and contextualizes quite complex things about metaphysics, that for me would make perfect sense. And I'm understanding that. I know from great circle leader Jill Hay, I was with her just before she'd died. My sister had been with her, and I remember leaving the hospital and coming back, and Jill's dad, had sort of come for her and said, this is what's going to happen. And she was a brilliant medium. She had a great evidence of life after death, but she didn't want to go. And why would she? She had her wife and so much to live for, and it was a horrible cancer that had got into and was destroying the physical shell, the vessel for this life. So I think that Spirit starting to contextualize it for people that need a little bit of understanding about what to do. Follow this car; it's going to take you to the next destination. And I think that's really beautiful, Sarah, and quite powerful. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I believe that was him understanding and describing his journey towards heaven. And there's another question there about, was it all in his imagination? Well, what is our imagination if not a place where our pure thought collides with the universe of pure thought, otherwise known as the divine energy of the spirit world, and God being the sum particles of all that energy. So for me, our imagination can be inspired very much by the spirit world, by God, as I describe as the sum particle of all that energy. Thank you, Sarah. Lovely question. Lovely. Julie says, when her dad passed, he knew he was passing. He saw his mum, brother-in-law. The last thing he said to us was it was going to heaven. It was beautiful. Lovely, Julie. And again, thanks for sharing that. And I get lovely feeling hearing that from other people, because we hear it so often from our friends and family. And as a medium, you get the communicators that talk about bits and pieces they know. Equally, there are people that just didn't know what was happening, and it was really confusing to them. And there was I won't go into too much. There was a young lady who had been murdered, and she had been killed quite quickly during a very violent attack. But she'd been on the scene, and for her, it was as if she was experiencing it in her body. So she couldn't understand what had happened, as she felt absolutely fine. Lovely evidence from her afterwards that she was able to find that peace, able to contextualize and understand what had happened to her, and was able to give some evidence about her killer. And although sadly you can't just turn up the police and say we know the killer was, because someone from Spirit has told us, because that in itself is not evidence. What was comforting for this young lady's friend, who I'd help interpret the information, was that she was absolutely right. And a friend that had had a new life after this life had given evidence of the murderer, which tied up with the guy that had done it and did eventually get convicted of his murder. So it was great confirmation for a friend that was a life after life. Sue says, wonderful story. I too was with my mum when she passed. She told me her mum was next to me and waiting. It gave me great comfort. Lovely, Sue. And, you know, as a spiritualist, I love being surrounded by these stories. You know, people say, as a spiritualist, why do you keep going back to church and seeing this evidence? And for me, it's a way of life, and it's understanding that and sharing that story. Amy says, before her dad died, grandfather visited my mum in her dreams. And when my nan died, she said her daughter was here to take with her. And it's been a similar story for all my family members. Again, Amy, you know, really, really lovely. And I said to my dad has never been on this show probably as my guest. He's often been on with my mum, but I'll have to interview my dad one time, because, you know, my dad as a very young boy sat up in bed and had a full-blown conversation with his nan the night she had died, and she'd already left her physical body, and it was his sort of start into spiritualism. And she'd sort of said, you know, be a good boy and look after your mum and dad and that sort of stuff. And for me, it's just wonderful evidence that our life after our life continues. Terry says that my daughter's just said to me, Mummy, I'm a sidekick. I asked what she meant. I read your mind. Think you mean psychic, sweetheart. That's lovely, Terry. And kids are wonderful, aren't they? And, you know, depending on the foundations you give them, you have some amazing stories. And, you know, my 6-year-old and 3-year-old, we every other day probably talk about heaven and what it means to them, not in a creepy or a scary way, but in a wonderful way. You know, if you ask both my boys what heaven is, they talk about it being an amazing place, and they're only sad when they can't visit it as easy as people from heaven visit us. So Slater Paul Liz says, I work with dementia and end of life comes to end life, always start talking to the mum, the dad, past loved ones. So yes, think loved ones are there waiting for you to leave this world. Yes, very true, Slater. And again, I had that personal experience with my nanny June. My nanny June had several strokes, and she had several more towards the end of her life. And she ended up spending parts of the last part of her life in care homes. And I found it sometimes intimidating on wards, going into places where people were at end of life, and a lot of limited understanding. Like, oh, try and ignore those people shouting out and calling out to their mum and dad. They don't even know their mum and dad are dead because of the dementia or because of something else. And as a medium, when I started to develop as a medium, I realised that, you know, there are these people shouting out, my mum's here, my mum's here. It's because their mum was there in the room telling them it was going to be okay. But their physical body had you know, limitations in understanding that. LJ Blue Eyes said, my dad told me my mum was coming for him. Do people come and cross you over? LJ, my honest belief is yes. In almost every situation, our loved ones are already there for us, and sometimes they come and help us cross over. I also get evidence from many communicators when they talk about making a place for us. And you know, we know that you're going to come here. You're going to come to the same place I am right now, and I make a place for you. Obviously, there are some things where destiny have a huge amount of play, and people have a lot of time to plan for it. And there are other things that can suddenly happen dynamically and quickly that, due to someone else's decisions and free will, don't necessarily coincide with the full destiny. So although I believe in destiny, and I believe that most of us are marching to the beat of our own drum towards that destiny, I do think that every now and then someone else's destiny or someone else's free will can kind of screw that all up. Sometimes natural disasters happen, and there is evidence from communicators who say, I didn't know it was going to be a natural disaster, but when I died, I kind of realized that I knew that was going to happen, and I was happy to be there. That was the end of my experience. Other times, and you know, if I mention things like the tsunami in Sri Lanka, I remember having evidence from the spirit world of saying that we did not expect as many people to cross over to the spirit world at the time of that tsunami, because, you know, I had evidence from some communicators and some guides that the tsunami wasn't projected to have taken as many lives, to have been as many sudden transitions to the spirit world. And then I've spoken to other spiritualists who said, Yeah, we knew that was going to happen. It was one of the major events, and people that took holidays there, they always knew it was in their destiny to be in that place at that time. The people that narrowly survived, that was also part of their experience. They were meant to go through it, to live through it, and tell that story because it's going to influence them in later life. So I've heard all sides of that story, and I think somewhere in between that is an element of truth, which for me leads me to believe that both is possible. For some people, it was absolute destiny. It was their time. It was their experience. And for every now and then, there are people just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it wasn't part of their destiny. Now, user Spirit of Love says, "Hi, I had a near-death experience when I floated backwards towards the most intense, powerful light with an enticing, overwhelming love. I saw people waiting like at a railway station. Some I knew, others I didn't." Again, thank you for sharing that, my friend. And people that talk about near-death experiences have had similar experiences. Sometimes people have had conversations who have said, "It's not your time, mate. Get yourself back down and into that body." Although I can't claim to have had a near-death experience, I've had a major event in my life. And, 11 and a half, 12 years ago, I had a major stroke. Age 25, I killed 1/3 of the brain cells in the left-hand side of my head. And for all intensive purposes, was told, my family were told that there was a good chance I was going to sort of die that weekend. I didn't, thank goodness. I do believe that the power of prayer and healing had a major impact on my physical sort of return to health. But I had an experience where the night before I had the spontaneous recovery, I remember being surrounded by love and light and a rainbow of energy, as if my entire hospital room had been plugged into a disco light ball of love and light and energy. Spirit of Love says, "I heard my mum's voice." This is part of that near-death experience. I'd passed 11 years earlier. This was in 2003, and it was not my time, and I chose and I'd fought to go to the light. She mentioned my son. I was back in the room. Lovely. And, lovely evidence there of saying that this isn't quite right, and your body is going to be strong enough. Sadly, when our vessel, our physical shell, becomes unable to keep pushing us forward, I think that's when there is no way to return. And a good friend of mine's son died several years ago, died of multiple injuries after falling off a roof. And the human being in me finds it hard to believe that you would have chose a life like that if you had any element of choosing your destiny. But actually, after that fall, there was no way they could come back. So, again, somewhere between destiny and not destiny, and having to control your reaction to it. Right, I'm going to take one more question, folks, because already the time has gone without us. So, Michaela Hannah, I'm going to give you the last question. You said my partner died 3 times, and he said he saw the light and was told to come back. How he explains it's lovely. He could hear us and said he was in the middle of 2 wells. Wow, lovely experience there, where it shows again our spirit friends and loved ones are around us, looking to do everything for us. And when the physical body is capable of recovery, there is this opportunity to continue and experience those things, which leads me to believe that when we're unable to, it's not through want of trying, it's because it's the end of our life experience in that body. A few other questions coming in, but as I say, it's come towards the end of the show now. Peachman's just said, "Yes, wait till you see in your dream state. It's pretty much what it's like. Obviously, we are fully aware." Lovely, Peachman's Christy Booth. Thank you for sharing that. So, folks, it's 9:15, so I just want to draw your attention to a few other things going on Spiritual Psychic TV. Please do head over to Spiritual Psychic online website. Think about the directory, and a demonstration of mediumship every Saturday night. So tomorrow night from 8 p.m. do find yourself on YouTube or Facebook. You've got free mediumship, free readings, a different reader every week, and lots of wonderful evidence of that life after death. Kez Egerson will be your medium tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Spiritual Psychics TV. And then I invite you to join the Divine Service with Wimbledon Spiritualist Church every Sunday morning from 11 a.m. and almost always broadcast live from Wimbledon Spiritualist Church. This week, actually, the family are all away and there's no one to physically open the church. So we will be beaming the church service via Spiritual Psychics TV from a little holiday B&B somewhere near Bath. on Sunday morning. I can't remember the name of the medium now for Sunday. I'm going to have to look it up. But my mum and dad, Reverend Brian Jackie. Jason Rothwell. Of course, he will be the medium. He'll be remotely dialing in from home as well, and you'll have that lovely medium, Jason, giving evidence of life after death. There'll be a reading, and those that usually come to the congregation will be watching from home on YouTube too. So do check that out Sunday. Say that again. Okay, so Richard's just saying there's quite a lot of you commenting about near-death experiences. So we'll dedicate an entire show perhaps to near-death experience. And I invite you to my own Facebook page at Ash Robinson Medium and or the Spiritual Psychic TV fan page. I've put a little poll up last week to see the types of things you would like to see on this show over the next couple of months, for as long as Richard James continues to be happy to broadcast it. So let us know about the types of things you would like to talk about. One quick announcement, folks. 9:30 tonight for VIPs. There's a trance special. So if you're not a VIP, you've still got a little bit of time to become one. Go to the website. Very important patron. It's a way of contributing towards the show. But for all our VIPs tonight, there's a very special trance demonstration at 9:30. I hope you all have a lovely time with that. And thank you for those that have been on the show tonight. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope that you've been able to follow us. There's some brilliant questions tonight. It seems to have gone really quickly, Richard. So hopefully there wasn't too much waffle. One more thing, folks. Okay. Brand new spiritual magazine. So brand new spiritual magazine, I think it's called Spiritual Life. And for those of you that want to share your experiences, budding sort of authors and editors and things you want to write, start thinking about your contributions. What do you want to tell us about? And there'll be opportunities to participate in this new written article product, Spiritual Life magazine, which is it's a digital magazine, isn't it, Richard? Yeah, so a lovely new product for us to share all our human experiences and our spiritual experiences. But yeah, check out the main Spiritual Psychic TV page and website for more information on that. But apart from me thanking all of you again, I want to take a moment to say thank you again to Richard James for producing this show, giving me the opportunity to waffle about my knowledge of life after death and some of the truths of spiritualism as I've come to know them. I think everything I've said is always caveat by the fact that it's my honest, humble opinion and what I think based on my inspiration. Always keen to hear about you and your inspirers, because together we own all the many pieces of that jigsaw and we can all see that bigger picture together. But we started with White Eagle and we'll finish with White Eagle that spoke about keep on keeping on in pursuit of happiness towards that light and that sun. God bless you all and good night.